everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. Alright, so back onto the Civil War. We're going to start talking about today the strengths of the North, the strengths of the South, the weaknesses of both, some new technology that's going to come out at the time. So we talked about the first Battle of Bull Run, which was a huge loss for the North. They turned around and retreated back north. Everybody was really untrained. The Battle of Bull Run, which will eventually be referred to as the first Battle of Bull Run, because there's going to eventually be another one, makes everybody realize this is a for real, legit war. So everybody kind of takes a step back. They assess what they have and what they don't have. And on paper, it looks like this war should last about a week, and the North should win. The North should absolutely dominate the South on paper, and that's not what happens. That's not what happens at all. Actually, at the beginning of the war, the North doesn't do real well. And we're going to talk about today kind of the reasons for that, for on both sides. Why it looked like they should win, and then some of the things the South had going for it that aren't as easily seen on paper. All right, let me put myself up here in the corner. All right, so strengths of the North. All right, I got a little graph here. All right, so this is North and the South compared. Really, what these graphs do is show you how much more dominant the North is than the South. All right, population-wise, the North is absolutely astronomically superior to the South. Much more population. So they have a much larger fighting force. That gives them an advantage. Remember, all the immigrants are showing up in the North because you're already having factories and things in the North. So they have a large population of people who are willing to sign up for the military and fight, much less draft them. And we'll talk about the draft as we get further into this unit. Railroads. The North, because they'd had the factories, have the most railroad tracks. This is pivotal for being able to move men and supplies back and forth. The South, really struggling. Factories. As we talked about in depth before the start of the Civil War, all the factories are in the North. The reason this is pivotal is because the North can produce things. Guns, clothing, shoes. Shoes ends up being a really big one. Because keep in mind, how are you getting from one battle to the next? You're walking. All the men are walking. When your shoes wear out, you can't get new ones, all right? And when I say your shoes wear out, I mean you literally, there is no sole, like you're barefoot. You're wearing rags around your feet so you don't destroy your feet. Shoes were a huge issue for the South in the Civil War. There's a lot of things that was an issue. There's food shortages and stuff that we'll talk about, but shoes. Shoes was a huge issue, and the North never struggled with it because they had plenty of factories. Farms. As crazy as this sounds, you're like, the North has more farms than the South? Yes. Now, you may see this big old, the line here, cotton. Because that's what the South is growing. When it says farms, what they're talking about here is they're talking about the farms for food to eat. The South is growing cotton. That's all the South has been growing. They've been getting all their stuff from either the North or from other countries. Wealth. Your ability to buy things and fund an entire war, that's in the North as well. Iron, which is pivotal for guns and ammunition and really anything war-related needs iron. All of this is in the North, all right? South done got cotton. Now, the South fully expects that the fact that they have a ton of cotton is going to be very beneficial to them, because the South expects to be able to sell the cotton to England and France and make a bunch of money off of it, and then buy basically anything they need from England and France. That's going to be a problem real early on, mainly because the South doesn't have a navy. They have ships that can trade, but they don't have like military ships, which is a navy. The United States of America does. The United States of America also realizes the only way the South can make money and fight this war is if they sell their cotton. So the South, or the United States, is going to put a blockade on the South. But we'll get to strategy here in a second. All right. On paper, the South, it looks like they're just going to get the snot beat out of them. All right. Because they have, all these things are needed for war. All right. money, food, materials, the ability to produce things, transportation, people willing to fight. Like, on paper, this should last about a week. This is a not nearly as interesting graph, but it talks about more of the specific numbers of the vast amounts of differences in the North and the South. So, once you get here, all right, and obviously on paper, Lincoln's like, all right, if we really have to fight this war and we have to fight it aggressively, we really need to figure out, like, what's our strategy going to be? Now, the North is going to have two strategies, a plan A and a plan B. All right, so let's talk about plan A. Random little picture of the United States during the war. I should go ahead and point this out because we're going to talk about it more. You may always see that there's the North here. That's the Union, the United States of America. Then you got the Confederacy. And if you've noticed on the maps, these middle states always, and they're called the border states, that they're a different color. So is there like 3 countries, Mr. Wagstaff? No, there's only 2. All the border states are part of the United States of America. All right? So unless it's specifically labeled a Confederate state, it is part of the United States of America. Here's why they're important. These are slave states. There are 5 slave states that never joined the Confederacy. All right? And they're mainly the border states. So not all slave states joined the South during the Civil War. All right? So that's why they are considered border states. And, I mean, they're literally on the border. But the North also realizes these guys, are they really going to help you out? Like, can you really go depend on them to, like, help you out? So there is some not real trust with the border states because they're clearly slave owner states, and they probably wouldn't be super against the South winning. And if the South did win and got left alone, they may join at some other point. That's why the border states are kind of kept separate. All right. Just when you see the maps, that's why the border states are always considered like a little different. But they are part of the United States. So here is how there are really 2 possible ways of the North going to win. Now, the first one, and this is going to be the most common one, I got my little thing here. What color do I want to use? I guess I can use black here. So there is a capital right here. Beep, 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 beep. All right. That is going to be Richmond, Virginia. You know how the easiest possible way is of winning the Civil War is with green now. I want to X out. Take over Richmond. If you march, all right, and I'll use green again. If you march from right here on the border of Maryland and Virginia, where Washington, D.C. is, down here, and take over Richmond, Virginia, war is over. This is what Lincoln thinks is going to happen. It's like capture the flag. Lincoln thinks all he has to do, march down to Richmond, Virginia, capture it, war's over. So that's their plan A. All right, their plan A, take over Richmond, Virginia. Everything is done in Richmond, Virginia. There's no way the South can try to fight this war if they don't have Richmond, Virginia. So if Richmond, Virginia falls, the war is over. Lincoln's like, I'm just going to buffalo it. I'm just going to go straight for it. And I'm going to take it over. So Lincoln really feels confident that he is going to be able to take it all over. All right, or take over Richmond and end the war. But he's like, just in case that doesn't work, I probably need a plan B. All right. So his plan B seems like crazy talk, but he's going to go with it. So the guy who comes up with plan B is a guy named Scott, last name Scott. He's an old guy, so he can't fight. He can't really help. He's not really on Lincoln's bench to put in, but he has good ideas. He says, look, what you need to do is the Mississippi River comes in through here. All right. I don't know if you can see how that blue on blue there. The Mississippi River is in the center here. This is the only way the South can get supplies back and forth, and supply the South is on both sides. All right. If we were able to encircle the entire South and shut it off from the outside world, including taking over the Mississippi River, if we were able to do that, we could completely strangle the Confederacy. So this plan B, because it's about circling it and choking it out is referred to as, referred to as the Anaconda Plan. So the Anaconda Plan, Anaconda is a big old snake, wraps things around and like murders it viciously. All right. So this, this one says Scott's Great Snake because it's Scott's the guy who came up with it. The idea that you can completely surround the South and put a stranglehold, and once you have it completely surrounded, they don't have any outside help, as we saw from that graph. They're not self-supportive. They have to have help from the outside somehow. So if you surround it and then slowly squeeze and suffocate it, the South will have to surrender. Now, Lincoln's like, there's no chance that'll happen because up and down the Mississippi River, let me get my little boop, boop, boop. We'll do it in pink, whatever. Up and down the Mississippi River here, the Mississippi River is really important, like crazy important in the United States. So there's a whole bunch of forts that have been built up and down the Mississippi River to make sure that nobody, boop, 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 I guess in the South is the ones that matter, that are up and down the Mississippi River that defend the Mississippi River from any other country trying to mess with it. All right. Well, the Confederacy owns all those forts now. So in order to complete the Anaconda Plan, you have to do like the suicide mission of trying to take over the Mississippi River, which is basically suicide because you'd have to fight fort after fort after fort, and that just seems like a bad idea. But he's like, hey, if we got to try it, we'll try it. So the Anaconda Plan, first, he wants to, let me make that a little smaller. Beep, beep. Make little boats here. Beep, beep. Awful boats with Mr. Wagstaff. Boop, boop, boop. Since the North has a navy, they can put a blockade on the South and keep it from trying to trade with England and France, which is really going to hurt England and France. So they can blockade the Anaconda Plan here, all the way around, pretty effectively in the water. They clearly, the top, that is the border, right? And then the Mississippi River that comes out through here, all right? This is the part where it's going to be difficult to complete, but Lincoln's like, we're going to try it anyway, and he calls it his Anaconda Plan. So the two ways that the North has of winning is, number one, take over Richmond. Number two, the Anaconda Plan, which is to surround the South and suffocate it until they tap out. All right? So, the South, all right, it looks like this war should be over really quick. It's not. And it's not really until after the war is over, historians look back on this and they're like, why did the South not get the crap beat out of it really quick? Well, there are some strengths in the South that people weren't really thinking about at the time that really proved to be pivotal. Number one of the main things is the only thing the South has to do to win is not lose. Don't tap out. As long as they never say that they quit, they win. Because the South isn't trying to take over anything. The South is just trying to be left alone. So as long as they don't submit, as long as they don't quit, as long as they don't surrender, they win. So it's very difficult. You got to beat them so bad. They're like, you just do whatever you want to us. Just stop murdering us. That's a pretty vicious beating when you desperately don't want to be beaten. All right. So it is a defensive war. Not only is it a defensive war, one of the things that's important, since they're defending themselves, almost all the battles are going to take place in the South. There's only a very few that we'll talk about that take place in the North. The battles that take place in the South knows they're coming. The South can barricade themselves in. The South always has the advantage in the battle because they can take the high ground, they can get set up, and then the invading army is the one that has to attack. So the South always has an advantage with the landscape. Another thing that they really were not expecting is even though the South has a much smaller population, they grew up rural. They can ride horses and shoot guns. A lot of the Northern military are like Irish immigrants who've never used a gun before. All right. The Southerners made much better natural soldiers because they were used to riding horses, shooting guns, and living outdoorsy lifestyles than the Northerners were. So the Southerners actually made better soldiers than the Northerners did. And here's a big one. And oh my gosh, this was absolutely huge. Better leadership. This here is Robert E. Lee. Now, if you remember, we talked about Robert E. Lee at this point in the story. He's over here washing dishes still. You guys need me? No? No? You don't need me? Okay, I'm just going to wash some dishes. So Robert E. Lee, still at this point in our story, is washing dishes. Spoiler alert, he's going to get put in charge. And he's pretty impressive militarily when he gets put in charge. So, Robert E. Lee is kind of the pinnacle of this fantastic leadership the South has. The North, on the contrary, has worthless leadership. I don't want to say worthless, but by comparison to the South, the Southern leadership just in combat, time after time after time, defeats a superior Northern military. So the Confederacy, with great leadership like Robert E. Lee, who will get put in charge, really are able to have a lot more success than anybody thought they would. This is a quote here of Robert E. Lee. It says, "With all my devotion to the Union and the feeling of loyalty and duty of an American citizen, I've not been able to make up my mind to raise my hand against my relatives, my children, my home. I've therefore resigned my commission in the Army and save in defense of my native state, which is the sincere hope that my poor services may never be needed. I hope I may never be called on to draw my sword." So that is the actual writing of his resignation letter, saying, you can't make me go fight Virginia because I'm from Virginia. He goes, I want to go down there. Hopefully they don't need me for anything. I'll offer my services, but hey, it's a very amicable breakup from Robert E. Lee's perspective. He's like, hey, just, gotta go do my thing. Another big thing that gets underrepresented in the strengths of the South is the fact that they were fighting for a way of life. They genuinely believed if they lost, their entire life and everything they've ever known is going to get taken from them. Keep in mind, most of the people fighting, if not every single person fighting in the South, is not a slave owner. Rich people were slave owners. The rich people weren't fighting. It was the poor people. But it was this idea that your entire way of life is going to change if you lose this. So they are literally like fighting for a way of life. Makes them less likely to surrender, more aggressive. The Northerners, a lot of the immigrants came over here because they're looking for food, like 3 meals a day, and yeah, I'm good. So a lot of the people in the Northern Army aren't quite as committed to the cause long term as the Southerners were. So again, those things all kind of build together with their ability to ride and shoot, understanding, that it's a defensive war. They know the land better, the fact they're fighting for a way of life. That smaller population of the Southern Confederates is comparable to the much larger army of the North is because of their motivation to fight and their ability to. So let's talk about the South strategy. You might be a Civil War buff, right? If you are, there is a very good chance you still have never heard about this. What's the South's strategy to win this war? Almost nobody knows about it because it never happened, all right? Because the South lost. Here's how the South is going to win the war. Get England and France on your side. Period. England and France helps out the South. South wins, becomes their own country. That is the South's goal, all right? It's an all eggs on one basket thing, all right? This is the closest picture I have for it. So cotton is king. So here's the logic in the South, all right? So the South wants to be its own country. England and France love the South's cotton. The South is like, hey, England and France, if you help us out defeating the United States of America and get them to leave us alone, we, the South, will give you preferential treatment on getting cotton. Because at the time, the South is where England and France got all their cotton from. So why would England and France want to help out the South? Well, America had gotten pretty strong by this point, all right, and it's starting to become kind of, not a nemesis, but competition, all right, on Earth. And so England and France don't really like the fact that America's getting bigger and stronger. Well, if America split in half, then all of a sudden it's half as strong. That would be great. So England and France would like to see the South win the Civil War because it would make the United States weaker. All right? Now, you might be like, yeah, but the South has slaves. There's no way that they're going to go down there and help out the South. Like, they're not going to support slavery. Here's the South's argument on that. Because England and France had gotten rid of slavery. It's outlawed in England. It's been for a long time now. And they think America is ridiculous for having slavery. The South says, oh, okay, all right, I understand that you don't like slavery. You know who else has slaves? The United States of America. Remember, there's 5 slave states still in the North, in the United States of America. All right. So the United States of America has never outlawed slavery. And it's never happened. So they're like, so they're just as evil as we are. If you think slavery is evil, we're 2 evil countries fighting each other. So one of us is not morally superior to the other. That's a really strong argument. That is a really strong argument. And England and France is like, yes, I see that. I would like for the South to win. Yes. Now, here's where it gets weird. And this happens all the time in warfare. England and France won't help the South unless the South can prove they can win without the help of England and France. Because the last thing England and France want to do is come over, help out the South, and then the South still lose. If the South still loses and they get pulled back in, then it makes a really awkward relationship with America and England and France. When Robert E. Lee takes command, and again, in our story, he has not taken command yet. When Robert E. Lee takes command, he's in all eggs in one basket. He realizes that the South cannot permanently stand up to the North. All right, they have to get England and France involved. So Robert E. Lee's strategy is going to be to try to take over a very famous northern city to prove to England and France that the South is strong enough to invade the North and defeat and take over a northern city. Now, so when Robert E. Lee comes in, here's his goal. All right, is to take over a famous northern city. Well, he's not going to go take over Washington, D.C. Because if he takes over Washington, D.C., well, that would be impossible because that's where all our troops are, and it'd be a suicide mission to take over Washington, D.C. Like New York City and Boston, too far north. I mean, there's no way you can walk that far and do that. And plus, those are well-defended port cities. Philadelphia, however, is not really guarded, not really a port city, and it's a very famous city because this is where the Declaration of Independence was signed, all that stuff. So England and France are familiar with Philadelphia. Robert E. Lee's goal, the only strategy the South has to win this war, once it's obvious the North isn't going to quit, is if they can take over Philadelphia. All right, if the South can take over Philadelphia, and that means you got to march past Washington, D.C., and be undetected by the North, because you can't fight them the whole way up there, and basically show up at Philadelphia and take over the city, even if you're only owning the city for like a day. It shows England and France how strong you are. So Robert E. Lee and all this strategy that we're going to talk about when we get him in place, he's got to take over Philadelphia. If he doesn't take over Philadelphia, there's no other plan, because without taking over Philadelphia, he can't get England and France involved. So big focus by Robert E. Lee is to take over Philadelphia and get England and France involved. All right, new technology. Changing gears here a little bit. This is crazy. All right. So, America, the reason so many people died in the Civil War is because it's Americans killing Americans. Americans are really good at killing each other. All right. So, during the Civil War, we start implementing more ways of killing people more effectively. All right. This here is what's called a MiniBall. All right. MiniBalls were crazy, crazy brutal. Now, there's a new thing they started doing with bullets at the time, and they started cutting these grooves in it, all right? And it's called rifling. They would also have these grooves inside a gun. They would start putting, which makes a musket a rifle. Oversimplifying for you gun people, but for the people that are not gun people, go with me, all right? So let me show you kind of what the concept is. Even though this has grooves in it, it gives the same effect. This is, when it is rifled, it has these grooves in it. It comes out in a spiral like a football, all right? This is drastically more accurate than the way it had been done for a really long time, which is just like a paintball, basically. It comes out of a smooth bore. Comes out, this isn't like a knuckleball. You don't know where it's going to go. So, they learned early on that if you put the rifling here on the bullets, and this is an actual lead bullet, all right? And you put the rifling inside the gun, which makes it a rifle, instead of having like a 50-50 chance of like in my classroom, I'd use an example. Whatever the furthest wall that you see right now in your room, you have 50-50 chance of hitting that with a musket. It's a slight exaggeration, but the muskets are horribly inaccurate. All right, I mean, just ridiculously inaccurate. Now you can hit like a 50-cent piece at 100 yards relatively consistently if you're a really good shot with these rifled bullets. There is a problem though, is once guns become really accurate, and you may have seen them in history, everybody lines up shoulder to shoulder and just points their muskets at each other and fires. The reason they did that, and they sit like 50 yards apart, is because the muskets were so horribly inaccurate. All right, so your whole group would just fight, just get out as many bullets as possible. All right, hardly ever effective. All right, once they created these rifled bullets like this, now everybody lines, and this is so. America created new technology and stuff in the Civil War that helped kill people. We didn't change our strategies. So the rest of the world is looking at us like we're really dumb, all right? Because when we create these really accurate rifles, we still start out by standing in lines in front of each other, aiming, firing, pow! And everybody dies on both sides. And then like the commanding officer on his horse is looking at the other commanding officer on the other side, like, I'm going back and get more men. This guy's like, I'm going to get some more men too. And they run back and they come back and murder each other again. It's really dumb. You know what you should do? Hide. Get behind a tree. That's a gradual process in the Civil War that they start going to more guerrilla tactics or hiding behind things. So once the rifle comes out, which makes it much more accurate like this, they start creating guns that can that are breech loaders. You can load them from behind, because if you fire a gun, all right, how do you reload in the Civil War? You have to like stand up to wherever you are, lay it down, and then like put all the stuff in the top. If you have to stand straight up to this 5-foot gun, all right, in the middle of the field when everybody else has really accurate rifles, how long are you going to survive? Not very. So what they did is they let you load it from behind, all right, so that you could be crouched down and load the guns from behind. This also allows for the guns to be loaded faster doing it that way, being what's called a breech loader. So now, not only do the bullets much more accurate, but you can reload faster and get more bullets out quicker. So, I'll show you this picture here. This is for reference of how big it is. This is a top to a can. All right. This is what an M16 fires. Is a 5.52. This is the bullet that comes out of M16. This is what they shot in the Civil War. Massive, and they're made of lead. All right. This is soft metal. So they're called MiniBalls, and they're incredibly destructive. When they would shoot out, they would spread out, and when they would hit you, it would hit bone and shatter the bones into a whole bunch of different pieces, and the bullet would shatter into a whole bunch of different pieces. All right. So if you got shot in the leg, it's so much fun to do this one in class, but I guess I can't do it and gross you out before lunch like I would do in class. So say you get shot in the leg, all right? You got shot in the shin. Well, the bullet exploded and your bone exploded. You have to get that bullet out because, and the reason it explodes is because it's soft lead and it splits apart, it leads to lead poisoning, right? You got to get it out or you'll die, all right? Well, it's in a bunch of different parts. So instead of like, and after a battle, you got thousands of people that need medical attention and you got one surgeon. And that surgeon wasn't a surgeon year and a half before the start of the war. You know what the surgeon, his job was before the war? He was a butcher. Because his only job is not to fix you. It's just get that leg off. All right? So you get shot. They take you to the hospital, which is just the closest plantation house that's commandeered, just the most horrific horror movie you can probably imagine. They take you into the room. Everything's caked in blood. It's awful. There's no idea of germs or anything like that. And like 1 out of 3 people who have surgery, all right, die from infection anyway. So they take you with your mauled leg and they lay you down and he pulls out his like saw. It's caked on with blood from all the other people of all day and just start sawing through your leg. There is no morphine there is there is no painkiller at the time. And you're like, oh, people just drink whiskey. Yeah, that's a movie thing, to drink alcohol before a surgery or something. You'll just die because it's a blood thinner. And if you drink alcohol before you have surgery, you'll just bleed to death. So, yeah, that's 100% a movie thing. So, people were completely awake when they would do this. So, what they would do to give themselves... Anyway, so you see this bullet right here? That's not a bullet that's been shot. They would take one of these bullets, and that's what you would bite down on when they sawed your leg off, all right? And so this is where the term bite the bullet comes from, like just grit and bear it. Comes from the Civil War, where to keep from biting your tongue off, they would put a bullet in your mouth, and this is literally somebody bit down on a lead bullet hard enough to put this indentation, as they had a arm or leg sawed off with no painkiller, all right? Absolutely bonkers insane. And then after that, you still have a 30% chance of dying of an infection because it was disgusting. Now, a couple other things that they came up with. Shells. So shells in the Civil War, it's like artillery, like you're shooting bombs at people from cannons. This was comes out in the Civil War. This is easy for you to understand because you probably thought this always existed. Yeah, you just shoot them artilleries at them and it lands and blows up. Prior to the Civil War, ships were basically the only thing that used cannons, and they shot like just iron balls to punch holes in the bottom of other wood ships. That was the purpose of cannons. In the Civil War, they start launching these things, which are like explosive, like grenades, out of the cannons, and you're launching explosives at them. And so if you're a cannon worker and you're launching these artilleries at them all the time, the other side hates you. So if you're a cannon worker and you get captured after a battle, usually you're like tortured to death. It's really bad, all right? Because they hated the cannon operators up one side and down the other. But the cannon operators aren't defenseless. No. If you're a cannon operator and you're getting overrun and you can't run away because you have, I guess you have to stay with the cannon? I don't know. They have these things called canisters. It turns your cannon into a massive shotgun for close range where you can disintegrate an entire army coming at you. This is what they looked like, all right? This is what they're filled with these BBs. You fire it from a cannon and it makes it a shotgun, and you got like 10 guys running at you, like, and then you're like, boom! And they just turn into a red mist. Like, the horrificness of this technology that came out in the Civil War, and the fact that America is really efficient at using it, is one of the big reasons why there's just a massive amount of deaths during the Civil War. All right, that's as far as we'll get today. We're going to pick back up more with the story of the general starting tomorrow.